As early as I could remember, I loved to bake. I was always on the tiny side, so I would climb up on a chair and I would get a big bowl, hand mix the sugar into butter, add in a little vanilla, add in the eggs, sift in the dry ingredients, and then add in chocolate chips. Chocolate chip cookies were my favorite thing to make. And it was my way of having my own little quiet time growing up in a crowded New York City apartment. It was my little escape, my little getaway. And when the oven timer went off, I would run and just indulge in those perfect chocolate chip cookies. As I got a little older, I got to travel, and I went to France, where my mom grew up in Paris. And I was so impressed with how they presented and the care and intent they had for cookies and cakes and candies, these little colorful bonbons, the different textures and looks. I was in love. So when I got back home, some time went by, and I said, what if I evolve some of this baking into chocolates, take on a little bit of a challenge? So fast forward to college, I was a little more concerned with paying off student loans than necessarily following a passion. So I majored in business, got a really great job at Macy's, helped them create their private label brands, and I would often go overseas. I'd go to Asia, North Africa, and I'd go to these factories, I'd source materials, I'd source accessories. But what I always loved was going out to these beautiful dinners with my vendors and experiencing new spices and flavors and foods. And as I evolved in my career, I got to go to Europe too and oversee trend and, again, getting all of these new ideas for food. And I would often come home instinctually and come up with a new chocolate recipe or come up with a new cookie recipe using a new spice that I found out about. I would even bake for my buyers, and I realized that when I would bake for them, they would spend more money. So I was like, okay, I've figured out what to do here. I'm making money. I'm still, making chocolates and cookies. I'm happy. Except one morning I woke up with some really intense anxiety, and I was getting ready. I was in the front of the mirror, and I just kept telling myself, no matter what happens, you're fabulous. And I was like, what is going to happen? Why am I saying this? So to keep up with the fabulous vibe, I put on some of my favorite clothes, my best black blazer, black pencil skirt, my Dior pumps, and I went into work only to find out that my job was eliminated. And I was crushed. And I had a corner office, and it just took so long to go from my boss's office to my office. After getting laid off, it's kind of like a walk of shame. You have to go all that long way. So needless to say, I needed some time to kind of recoup, and I decided, what if I build my own brand, but instead of doing clothing, I do chocolate, and I take all these brand building experience that I have. So that's what I did. I used my severance, and I jumped right into being an entrepreneur, and it was so hard. I imagined that it was just a recipe, just follow these steps and everything will work out. It does not work out that way. So I had to surround myself with a community of other crazy people that decided they wanted to have their own business. And I found a little more solace working with other women. I learned early on that women entrepreneurs have a lot higher chance of failing than men. So when I found Jessica from Cheese Grotto, she was the founder, we decided, let's take cheese and chocolate and do pairings. Two things that are fabulous, but you don't see a lot. And we went so far as to put the cheese on top of the chocolate. Forget the cracker, just cheese on top of the chocolate. So picture a Sicilian salted lemon bar, chocolate, and then we'd put goat cheese on it. And when you would take a bite, the lemon would just burst with flavor, become so much more vibrant. The goat cheese would be extra creamy. Sometimes we'd be a little daring and contrast ingredients a little bit. We'd take a rosemary chocolate bar and a blue cheese, two very, very strong flavors. But when you put them together, they balance each other out. It's like they're doing this beautiful dance together. We even went so far as to take cheese and put it into chocolate. I can be a little crazy. So instead of butter, right, your classic truffle recipe, chocolate, cream, butter, I did chocolate, cream, cheese. I did raclette cheese, and we would emulsify it into the cream, and it was wonderful. Forbes even called it like the next best chocolate. They wrote us up about it. So I was like, okay, what else can I do? Chocolate and wine, that's a classic that I went after. But chocolate and spirits, I didn't realize how well those two things went together until Virginia Distillery, another women-owned business, approached me, and we decided to do whiskey-infused chocolates. But instead of just adding in the whiskey, we really dove into the notes that are in each whiskeys that they made. So they had like a cuvee cask whiskey. So I would add that into the chocolate, but then I would also add in raspberry. So if you take a bite of the chocolate and then you take a sip of the whiskey, you'd get those berry notes. It almost would train your palate to pick up what was next. And it also took a little bit of the bite off a whiskey. Let's just be honest, whiskey can be strong. So during one of the pairings, there was a guest that was like, this is like heaven on earth. And at that moment, I took a step back and I was like, chocolate can create so much happiness, not just for me, but for everyone who indulges. Thank you.